Okay, so we're back on solving equations with one unknown. Talking about division. We've talked about multiplication, addition, subtraction so far. Now I'm on to division. So I'm on page 614 of our algebra chapter. And we've talked about a couple cases here. We've talked about this simplest case where we just have our variables on one side, constant on the other already set up for us. So we're just dividing each side by the coefficient to isolate the variable. And then we've looked into more complicated cases where we have to distribute, gather our like terms. And we solved this one where we had to bring all of our variables into the numerator. Let's go ahead and look at this last example here, where we're going to do very similar to what we did in this third problem, except for we're going to have to do a little extra distributing when we multiply this denominator by both sides. Remember here when we multiplied 3 times 2x, we could just get 6x. But here we're going to have to multiply 2 times the quantity of 3x minus 24, so we'll have to distribute. So let's take a look at what that's going to look like. I'm going to go ahead and put this on another piece of paper so you can check your work and follow along with me. And please go ahead and send me any questions as we're going over this. I know a couple of you got some different answers than I got, sent me some different things, so let's see if we can find where you had some mistakes. So remember our first step here, I'll put our steps over on this side, is going to be to get our variables all into the numerator, okay? And there are different ways that we can do that, but usually it's going to be some kind of multiplication, and in this case that's what it's going to be. So here my 3x minus 24 is in the denominator. I want to move it to the numerator. So I'm going to go ahead and just slide this all up here. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and rewrite this over 3x minus 24 equals 2. I'm going to multiply both sides by that entire denominator. Okay, and that might be a place where people made an error. And I'll go ahead and put that over 1 too, just so you can see it. But we all know at this point we're pretty good with that. 1 is that nice identity for division and multiplication. Anytime I divide by 1, I get whatever I had. Anytime I multiply by 1, I get what I started with. So I can insert 1s if I want to as placeholders, or as you get more comfortable, you don't need to do that anymore. Okay, so I've multiplied both sides by this entire denominator, and if you want, you can put parentheses around it just so you make sure you don't separate it. And that's a good idea because that will let you know you can cancel out that whole term. Okay, when we have that exact same term in the numerator and the exact same term in the denominator, we can cancel those out. But when I multiply it here, it's nice to have it in the parentheses too, because then hopefully you can see that this has to be distributed. I can't just get 6x minus 24. I have to take this 2 and multiply it by each term inside that parentheses. So let's go ahead and expand this out. I'm going to have x plus 7, and I'm going to just drop my over 1 because I know that's the identity and I don't need to write it. 2 times 3x is 6x. And 2 times 24, and it's a minus, 2 times 24 is 48, and I can just put the minus sign in front. Or you could think of it as 2 times a negative 24 is a negative 48. Either way you want to do it, you're going to have a minus sign in front of that 48. Okay, now we've got everything in the numerator. We're going to get our variables on one side and our constants on the other. And by one side, I mean one side of the equation, equal sign, excuse me. Variables on one side, constants on the other. And this is just like we did for the last problem, so hopefully this is seeming more familiar and getting more comfortable to you. And I guarantee you'll see a problem like this on your test and one on your final too. So this is a good practice problem to get really comfortable with these steps and applying them. So we'll go ahead, I've got this nice big coefficient here, so I'm going to go ahead and subtract x from this side. To start with. It's really up to you. You could have done this a different way. I'll wind up with 7 here, and then I have 5x minus 48. So now I've got my variables on one side, but I have constants on both sides. So I want to get my constants on the other side, so I'm going to add 48 to both sides. That will make that 48 go away. And you know, it's never a bad idea. It's certainly not required, but it's not a bad idea to check your math with a calculator. I mean, 7 plus 48, I think 55, but you know, doesn't hurt to check it. 55 is equal to 5x. And now we're back to our kind of basic equation here that we started the whole thing with when we just have a coefficient, a variable, and a constant. We're going to divide by that coefficient. So I'll put that on my steps here to divide by the coefficient. And then I'll go ahead and do that here. I'm going to divide by 5 each side. And maybe I'll make sure I write that here because we want to make sure that we're not just dividing this side and winding up with x equals 55. I think some people had that answer. So if that's the answer you had, here's what you need to remember to do to divide both sides by that 5 to get 11. Okay, and now once we've gotten our answer, let's check it. Let's plug it back in. And remember, when you plug back in, I don't want to plug it in here or further down because I could have made some algebra errors as I've gone on. I want to plug it back into this original equation. And sometimes it's even a good idea to look back to the original way the problem was written because sometimes you can even make the error before then. Make sure, okay, that's x plus 7 over 3x minus 24 equals 2, okay? Just double check that that's all correct. And then we can substitute, in this case, my 11s for x's. So I have 11 plus 7 over 3 times 11 minus 24 equals 2. So I'm going to wind up with 18 over 33 minus 24 is equal to 2. And again, 33 minus 24, no, 9. Just, it's okay to check it. So I'll have 18 over 9, and yes, that is equal to 2, and you can check that math too. So there's all our steps, making sure we have our variables on one side, our variables in the numerator, variables on one side, constants on the other. Make sure we're dividing each side by the coefficient, getting our answer, and then plugging it back in to check it. Okay, yeah, okay, great. I see some people are sending me comments that say they see where they made their error working through this. And we'll certainly work through some more problems like this as we go on. And you'll have a chance to practice this even more as we continue into this topic.